podcast. My name is Jack McLean, and I'll be hosting this solo episode today. I'll be discussing everything you need to know about how to protect yourself from head injuries, more specifically concussion, when playing a contact field sport like AFL. Obviously, there's a lot of traumatic situations that we can get into in the game, and a lot of luck can come into it. But how can we mitigate the risk factors? What does the science say in terms of research? And also learning off some experts in this area. I've been lucky enough to work in some professional clubs over my years in pro sport, and at those clubs, concussion is always a injury that pops up, and it's something that we've done a lot of professional development in. So I'm keen to share that knowledge and practical information, as well as some instinctual, maybe you want to call it the art of coaching around how to mitigate risks of injuries. And a lot of that art will come down to some common sense in terms of the importance of neck and shirt or girdle stability strength, and trunk strength as well. I'll discuss the 14-day protocol laid out from the AFL, Australian Rules Football League, and the steps to take. So if you're working in community sport, or perhaps you're a parent listening to this podcast and your kid plays football, some important steps that you want to take, as well as symptoms you want to monitor for your child. Now, of course, with any medical injury, you want to make sure that you've got a medical team to support you. But I know that's not often always the case, especially in rural sports. It can be really hard to have access to a sports doctor, sports physician. So often parents might be managing this, or coaches might be managing this, or strength and conditioning coaches might be managing these return to play scenarios. And then we'll finish on the importance of the testing for those that do have access to VOLD equipment, and you can use the dyno to strength in the 4 different positions of flexion, extension, and look at the ratio of those two, as well as lateral and lateral flexion comparing left to right. But we'll get straight into it. There's also some tips from Brian Mann regarding some functional movement patterns that we want to get into, some coordination work, and to challenge the vestibular aspect of the athlete for even when they do return to play. We know that the brain can take quite some time, over a month, to heal from concussion. So we want to make sure we're constantly challenging it from a cognitive point of view, and some supplements that you can take to help support that. But let's get straight into it. This is going to be a short one, 15-minute episode, but the science, there's not a lot of specific scientific research on AFL specifically. However, Joel Garrett has conducted some research, and I was lucky enough to meet him when I was working at Melbourne Football Club last year, looking at isometric strength, and is there a risk factor with those that are weak, and perhaps those that are lower than 0.6 for their flexion, which is when we're pushing down, flexing the neck, compared to extension where you're pushing back. If you're less than 0.6, your flexion to extension strength, are you at a higher risk of having prevalence of concussion injuries? So that's conducted. A lot of AFL clubs are involved in that research, and I'm yet to believe that's yet to be published, but he did give us a bit of information just to help us out with our programming, so I'll share that. Apart from his research, there's not a lot that I'm aware of specifically in this population. But Joel was looking at the 4 different ways that we can look at maximal isometric force capabilities. The test was in seated position to take the variation of using our feet, and it was used against the strain gauge using the VOLD equipment, where you're wearing a harness around the neck and you're maximally pushing up against it in those 4 different planes: flexion, extension, and lateral flexion, left to right. And that's ultimately just looking at how stiff and how strong is our neck, and therefore how stable is it to be able to handle high forces, particularly in a game like AFL where it's happening at 360 degrees. So how much strength do we have in the neck to be able to reduce that whiplash that occurs during a collision? Things like a bump, contested mark, pushing the back, or being tackled, or more importantly, particularly in rugby, tackling. A lot of concussions happen in tackling. And when we did some professional development with Brian Mann, he discussed that, like, knowing the player's position and the demands of their sport, you want to take that into account in their return to play protocols. But yeah, that's the main research to look at. So if you're interested in the science, check out Joel Garrett's work. It was a systematic review, meta-analysis on neck strength and any correlation with concussions. And I'll make sure to, when that is released, to add that to the show notes of this episode, so you can find the link there. In terms of the art of it, using coach instinct, so learning off experts like Brian Mann in his PhD in concussion. So tackle technique, it'd be silly not to factor in the fact that if you can be as strong as possible in all four of those planes of isometric strength, but if you keep putting your head in the wrong position while tackling an opponent, clearly you're at risk. So tackle technique, you can't ignore that, the importance of that. Developing wrestle and functional neck strength. So actually resisting against an opponent, someone who's trying to rip you to the ground, and doing wrestle combat sessions, no doubt will build robustness through the whole shoulder girdle, neck, and trunk core strength. So absolutely, if you have your chance in the off season to do some off season accessory work, and you had either you're weak in these areas, or you find yourself constantly getting head injuries and a couple of concussions over your career, might be a good idea to get some extra work in with a combat coach. And the other aspect of it is understanding that if you're anxious with concussion or any level of contact, perhaps that could put you at a higher risk. Speaking to experienced coaches, it seems like those that aren't confident in the contact tend to get more, and that's more just a coach's instinct, but something for us to take into account anyway for those that might need extra work on building their contact confidence, and whether that be getting stronger in the gym or perhaps just getting stronger with their contact work. The 14-day protocol. So typically in the AFL, day zero is when they're injured in the game or at training, to day 2. So day 1 and day 2 is complete rest. So we want to make sure they're symptom-free in normal daily living before progressing them from a physical point of view. Day 3 is where they introduce some aerobic activities, whether if they have no issue being on the bike, but if that's uncomfortable for their back or their neck from the contact, then just getting them go for a walk. So it's a talking pace aerobic activity. To progress each of these stages, they need to be symptom-free, and they need to be progressed from the doctor. Day 4, that's where we'll introduce running. So it's 3 sets of 8 to 10 reps of a 60-meter run, 15 seconds on, 15 seconds off, work to rest ratio 1-to-1, pretty easy for AFL athletes. Give them 3 minutes rest in between. That's day 4. So day 5, we're now progressing the speed of their running, as well as introducing stationary skills and some agility and some basic body weight strength. So the running, you could do 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 10 reps of those 60s, but the first set would be the same pace that you did yesterday, 15 seconds on, 15 seconds off. The second set, you build towards a 10-second rep, so you're getting some high-speed exposure. And then your third set, you might alternate. So you do a 10-second rep on the way up on the 30, and then a 15-second rep on the way back. So we're getting higher intensity running session in there. That's the progression from day 4. While introducing things like a 20-meter stationary kick, you might get 15 to 20 kicks each leg, some ground balls, 10 each side, and some handballs, working on your hands. Body weight strength could just be as simple as some injury mitigation work, single leg RDLs, single leg calf raises, some push-ups, and maybe some squats or lunges. So you're hitting some groin work, some upper body work, but it should be low resistance. You're not axillary loading, no bars on the back, no external resistance. You're just using your body weight, and it should be pretty easy for the athlete. And then throwing in some change of direction work. So typically with that session, they do it in blocks, so making sure they're symptom-free in between each block. Change direction could be simple, an accel, decel drill, a Y drill where they're cutting either side to their left, cutting to their right, perhaps like a shuttle pattern as well, so like a change direction where you're getting some deceleration in. Day 6, a non-contact training session with the group. So you're introducing team training, but no contact at all. So they can wear like a yellow hat to identify that, no contact. You're introducing reactive agility. So now you're cognitively challenging their change of direction movement patterns. And so it could be with the whistles when they need to accelerate or stop. It could be pointing which direction they need to change direction. and it also could be using the football. So doing some reactive ground balls or some reactive leading, for example, and then introducing a bit of speed. So exposing them to around that 80 to 90% top end speed. Day 7 could be a rest day or upper body strength session. So introducing external resistance with the upper body and core work. That would just depend on any neck pain. If you've got any neck pain at all, just leave the upper body strength work out. Day 8, we'll limit the contact team training because we're going to introduce that in a rehab sense. So introduce contact bag work with the rehab coach or one of the coaches. So they're doing contact in a controlled setting and then doing their first lower body strength and power session. And then day 9 to 14 is when they're ready to return back to the main group. So main training, their contact with the group, and they're preparing to play that week. That's the 14-day protocol. Some nutrition to support brain health. Obviously, you want to consult a sports dietitian, but here's just some general tips. So from a repair point of view, omega-3 magnesium. From an energy perspective, creatine, curcumin, but basically some anti-inflammatory and ketones. You want to reduce cell damage, also with curcumin as well as omega-3, vitamin A and E, and then melatonin and ketones. For inflammation, omega-3, turmeric or curcumin, melatonin and magnesium, and then for improved sleep quality, melatonin, magnesium. So there's some supplementary things that you could do to help with the repair and rejuvenation, as well as the ability to handle the different stresses that the athlete's been put on during that protocol. As I mentioned with the work that we did with Brian, it's important to tease out all different types of contact. So it may not be from tackling or being tackled. It could be from a bump in AFL rules football with a ground ball. It could be contested mark. It could be at a stoppage. So we want to speak to the player, look at some vision, and make sure to over the 14-day period and even after 2 weeks post to expose the athlete to those situations, as they may avoid them in their game, and there can be some performance setbacks. And as we mentioned before, if there is any anxiety around contact, there's a feeling from experienced coaches that they're at high risk of concussion when there is that fear. So we want to make sure we expose them to that stress in training so they're more confident on game day and at less risk, but also returning back to their performance. Oculomotor retraining. So important to work with the skills coach on acquisition. We want to challenge their decision making, even this is post the 14-day protocol. Challenge their hand-eye coordination. So engage the coaches and make sure that that's working for up to a month post concussion. As we know, decision making is impaired with concussion, so that's really, really important. And then make sure to strengthen once we've got that isometric strength back and they're back to their baseline. Start to challenge them from a neuromuscular point of view. Start to challenge them with their neck isometric strength and the shoulder girdle. So that could be like a neck isometric strength. Let's say the cable's attached and it's pulling you to left lateral flexion. So you're resisting that, keeping your neck neutral while doing your right arm lateral raise, for example. So we're getting co-contraction to shoulder and neck. As we know, they work together to stabilize their contact, particularly in chaotic environments like AFL, where a lot of it is reactive. So we want that pre-tension. We want strong traps, deltoids, and scapular muscles to resist that sudden impact. As you can then progress that from a seated position to more quadruped, so on all fours, that you've got that isometric cable work, or it might be a bungee, and the trainer is pulling, or one of the players is pulling bungee slightly in different positions while you're going through like a crawl. So your shoulders, hips, and core are all working while your neck is isometrically contracting. So that can then progress to a little bit more dynamic as you're using the eye neck, and we might be using bump bags to bump the player while they're resisting with the eye neck, which if you don't know what the eye neck is, you can Google it. It'd be a good investment for your child or for athletes tuning in, as it's multi-directional, so you can be moving around and the resistance changes, so you can involve the football with ground balls, contested marking, and the like, fend-offs, get into those position specifics. Really good for developing player confidence. Hopefully you got some tips out of this episode. It's obviously not something that we can prevent altogether. It's going to be in the game. It always will be. It's contact sport. It's highly chaotic. It's 360 degrees. We can't avoid all of them, but hopefully some of the risk factors that we're starting to learn with the research and speaking to experts, we can implement those at community level sports and really empower athletes to give themselves their best chance to reduce the likelihood of these injuries. And it's really, really important. So if you're not sure, or if you need to work with a professional, reach out. We've got strength and conditioning coaches that work in the AFL that can give you a program and also catch up with you, make sure you're executing these techniques at a really high level. So reach out at jackpreparelikeapro.com or feel free to just send us through some questions on social media. I will see you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to like the show and subscribe to the podcast. Share this with a teammate or a coach that you think would value it. Thanks, guys.